1 year after America had declared independence, war was raging in the New World between the 13 American colonies and the British Empire, which was trying to crush what it saw as a petty rebellion. And frankly, it wasn't looking good for the Americans. That is, until the fall of 1777, when the Americans would serve a crushing defeat to the British Army at the Battle of Saratoga. This would prove to be a decisive turning point in the war, and a shocking wake-up call for the British. Before Saratoga, British commanders and politicians never imagined the colonies stood a chance against arguably the most powerful empire in the world. But now, they realized not only was this nation of hastily trained farmers a serious force to be reckoned with, but because of Saratoga, other world powers like France and Holland might join the American war against the British. Reluctantly, British leaders were forced to begin considering, we might actually lose this war. But they were willing to use any means to stop that from happening. And it's this newfound desperation which may have been the cause of a mysterious event which took place in Paris the following year. Though this event is steeped in mystery and remains largely unexplained, we do know that it was meant to put an end to the war once and for all. But despite being a very dramatic and even comical set of circumstances, it's seldom spoken about nowadays, even though potentially it could have changed world history as we know it. It all began on one June morning in 1778, when Benjamin Franklin woke up at his home in Passy, France, where he was serving as minister to the French court on behalf of the American Continental Congress, trying to convince the French to support the American cause. But at some point on this morning, Franklin noticed that a package of documents had been kind of tossed in front of the gate of his house, which must have been surprising, especially when he opened the package and saw what it actually contained. Among various documents was a mysterious 6-page letter whose cover instructed Franklin to read this in private and before you look at the other papers, but don't be imprudent enough to let anyone see it before you have considered it privately. The author of the letter identified himself as one Charles de Weissenstein, a name which was obviously made up, which became more apparent from the letter itself. It matters very little for you in this state of busyness to indulge your curiosity in knowing who I am. I can serve you more effectually while invisible. If I succeed, I may never reveal myself. If I fail, surely my intentions merit some consideration from men professing patriotism. The letter itself offered no less than to single-handedly put an end to the American Revolution, according to the plans laid out in the other 2 documents of the package. To put it simply, this letter was essentially an attempt to bribe Franklin and many other revolutionary leaders, including John Adams, George Washington, and John Hancock, offering them positions from the king called peerages and lifetime pensions if they surrendered, put an end to the war, and used their authority to make the colonies submit to Great Britain. Adding further to the intrigue of the affair, the letter gave instructions to Franklin that if he was interested in this offer, he was to bring his response secretly to the Cathedral of Notre Dame between 12 and 1 p.m., either on July 6th or July 9th, and drop it off where a courier for de Weissenstein would be by the altar, having a paper in his hand as if drawing or taking notes. Franklin was to drop the response there and then leave immediately. In the event that Franklin was unable to access this part of the cathedral, which was gated off in places, Franklin was to locate a person in one of the aisles who will have a rose either in his hat, which he will hold in his hand up to his face, or else in the buttonhole of his waistcoat. Not only was de Weissenstein outright bribing the revolutionary leaders into surrender with sweets, trying to lead them with a carrot, so to speak, but he also tried to scare them with threats, arguing that surrender was in their best interest because not only could America not possibly hope to defeat the British Army in the field and the Navy at sea, but even if they did, America could not hope to support its independence, or survive very long as a separate country. Ye may exist indeed uncertainly as corsairs and interlopers, but cannot, for years we shall not live to see, as a regular commercial state. And when de Weissenstein went so far as to claim that our title to the empire is indisputable and will be asserted either by ourselves or successors whenever occasion presents, we may stop a while in our pursuit to recover breath, but shall assuredly resume our career again, Franklin wondered if it wasn't possible that the mysterious Charles de Weissenstein might actually be the eccentric King George III himself, which frankly is my favorite theory. I love the thought of the British king thinking, I know how I'll put an end to this rebellion. I'll pretend to be a guy called Charles de Weissenstein and send someone to just throw a bribe against Ben Franklin's front door, telling him to secretly meet a messenger at Notre Dame. But then he just gets so carried away with his letter, he kind of blows his cover and gives a hint as to who he really is. Unfortunately, however, we don't know who wrote the letter because ultimately no one ever discovered who this mysterious letter came from. Franklin never thought of accepting such a bribe, especially under such odd circumstances. But at this point in his life, for reasons we'll discuss a bit later, he basically despised the British whom he once loved so dearly. So Franklin didn't accept, nor did he keep the letter secret. Instead, he immediately reported the package to French authorities, and like an episode right out of Assassin's Creed, the French police staked out Notre Dame, identified de Weissenstein's courier, watched him as he kind of loitered in the cathedral, and when he finally left, police tailed him through the streets of Paris to the Luxembourg Hotel, where they confronted the man who, though he did turn out to be an Englishman, admitted nothing regarding the affair, and being guilty of nothing more than a visit to a great cathedral, he could not be arrested. And while Franklin's response to de Weissenstein was thus never sent to the pseudonymous interlocutor, Franklin did write a letter of response, a vitriolic refutation of all the arguments de Weissenstein had made, which was likely meant more for the French than for the British. If Franklin was going to give the French a document which argued that America was weak, he was also going to include a refutation which argued that America was, in fact, very strong, and that they would never surrender. Franklin wrote, "Our expectations of the future grandeur of America are not so magnificent and, therefore, not so vain and visionary as you represent them to be. The body of our people are not merchants, but humble husbandmen who delight in the cultivation of their lands, which from their fertility and the variety of our climates are capable of furnishing all the necessaries and conveniencies of life without external commerce. And we have too much land to have the least temptation to extend our territories by conquest from peaceable neighbors, as well as too much justice to think of it. Our militias, you will find by experience, are sufficient to defend our lands from invasion, and the commerce with us will be defended by all the nations who find an advantage in it. We therefore have not the occasion you imagine of fleets or standing armies, but may well leave those expensive machines to be maintained for the pomp of princes and the wealth of ancient states. We purpose, if possible, to live in peace with all mankind, and after you have been convinced to your cost that there is nothing to be got by attacking us, we have reason to hope that no other power will judge it prudent to quarrel with us, lest they divert us from our own quiet industry and turn us into corsairs preying upon theirs." Franklin envisioned a new nation with a small government, without a standing army or a navy, cheaply governed. This new nation would be successful because it would be supported by a majority populace of self-sufficient farmers, supporting themselves without much need for commerce. Thus, Franklin located the success of America in humble agriculture, with strong farmer militias. Franklin sketched a very romantic vision of peace, goodwill, quiet industry, and small government that, unfortunately, the United States would not long live up to, which, to be fair, is always the reality with any nation or person that believes in any ideals, and has not been demoralized by the evils of feckless pessimism, a fact which cannot be restated too often in these times. Franklin may have been wrong about America not having any ambitions for expansion, or that America wouldn't need a standing military, but he was correct in judging that America would be a success, and that this independence would be thanks in no small part to self-sufficient cultivators of the land.